Ultimate Custom Night occupies a very unusual place in the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline because it is not a traditional sequel, prequel, or side story in the normal sense. Instead, it functions as a metaphysical epilogue, a narrative space that exists almost entirely outside the physical rules of the series' world. Rather than advancing events forward, it turns inward, focusing on consequence, punishment, and the psychological aftermath of everything that came before. Where earlier games revolved around survival, investigation, and gradual revelation, Ultimate Custom Night is about stasis. Nothing progresses because this is not a story of change, but one of eternal repetition. At its core, the lore of Ultimate Custom Night strongly implies that the game takes place after the burning of the pizzeria, in a realm that is neither life nor death. The player is almost universally interpreted as William Afton, trapped in a self-contained nightmare engineered specifically for him. This interpretation is supported not by a single explicit statement, but by the cumulative weight of dialogue, character selection, and thematic consistency. Every animatronic present has some connection, direct or indirect, to Afton's actions. Even characters that were once jokes or minor antagonists are reframed as instruments of torment, suggesting that this place is shaped by memory and guilt, rather than physical reality. The most important figure in Ultimate Custom Night's lore is the vengeful spirit, often associated with the child behind Golden Freddy. This entity is not merely angry, it is fixated. Unlike other spirits who sought release, justice, or peace, this one seeks perpetuation. The repeated line, "I will never let you leave," defines the entire experience. This is not revenge meant to end with satisfaction, but punishment designed to last forever. The spirit does not want Afton to die, because death would be an escape. Instead, it traps him in an endless cycle of fear, mirroring the suffering he inflicted on others. Golden Freddy's role is especially significant because it represents a breakdown in the rules that governed earlier hauntings. Most animatronics were bound to physical suits or locations, but Golden Freddy has always existed on the edge of reality, appearing and disappearing without explanation. In Ultimate Custom Night, this liminal quality is expanded into full control over the environment. The spirit associated with Golden Freddy does not just attack the player, it defines the space itself. The game becomes a manifestation of its will, a personalized hell constructed from familiar faces and endless nights. The inclusion of animatronics from across the entire series, regardless of timeline inconsistencies, reinforces the idea that this is not a literal place. Characters that could not logically coexist appear together because logic no longer matters. What matters is symbolism. Each animatronic represents a different fear, failure, or sin tied to Afton's past. Some taunt him directly, referencing his actions and mocking his suffering. Others are silent, their presence alone enough to remind him of what he created. Even the mechanics of the game, where the player chooses the difficulty and lineup, can be interpreted as part of the torment. No matter how the challenge is configured, the outcome is always the same: endless struggle with no resolution. The constant repetition of nights is one of the most important narrative elements. In earlier games, surviving a week meant progress and eventual escape. In Ultimate Custom Night, survival means nothing. Winning a night only leads to another night. This design choice transforms mastery into futility, reinforcing the idea that skill cannot save the player. Afton's intelligence, adaptability, and persistence, traits that once allowed him to evade consequences, are rendered meaningless here. The game becomes a direct inversion of his philosophy. He believed he could always come back, but here, coming back is the punishment. The dialogue delivered by various animatronics adds layers to the lore by blurring the line between character and collective consciousness. Some lines feel as though they are spoken not by the animatronics themselves, but by the vengeful spirit speaking through them. This suggests that the torment is unified, controlled by a single will that uses familiar voices to maximize psychological impact. The constant reminders that the player is being watched, judged, and remembered emphasize that this is not random suffering. It is curated. The Old Man Consequences scene introduces a crucial counterpoint to the vengeful spirit's obsession. This character, who exists outside the chaos of the main gameplay, urges the spirit to rest and let go. His presence implies that even within this constructed hell, there is an awareness that the punishment has gone too far. However, the spirit's refusal to listen reinforces the tragedy of Ultimate Custom Night. Justice has transformed into fixation, and fixation into cruelty. The spirit has become trapped as well, unable to move on because it defines itself entirely by its hatred. From a broader thematic perspective, Ultimate Custom Night serves as a moral conclusion to the series' central conflict. It does not redeem Afton, nor does it glorify his suffering. Instead, it presents an uncomfortable truth: endless punishment does not heal past harm. The game leaves the player in a state of exhaustion, mirroring the emotional exhaustion of a story that has revolved around death and revenge for too long. By refusing to provide a true ending, Ultimate Custom Night forces the audience to confront the cost of never letting go. In this way, the lore of Ultimate Custom Night is less about adding new information and more about recontextualizing everything that came before. It is a story about consequences that cannot be escaped, even by death. It asks whether punishment without end is justice or simply another form of violence. And in doing so, it transforms the series from a tale of haunted machines into a meditation on obsession, memory, and the danger of allowing suffering to define existence forever. Golden Freddy is one of the most debated figures in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's story because the series deliberately presents conflicting signals about his fate. Unlike most other spirits, his narrative never settles into a clear resolution, and this uncertainty is intentional. Theories about whether Golden Freddy rested or not largely depend on how one interprets Ultimate Custom Night and its relationship to the earlier fire. What makes the discussion especially complex is that Golden Freddy appears to exist on a different level of reality than the other animatronics, which means his ending does not have to follow the same rules. One major theory argues that Golden Freddy did not rest, and is instead the vengeful spirit responsible for trapping William Afton in the endless torment of Ultimate Custom Night. This interpretation is built on several layers of evidence. The most important is the repeated implication that a single spirit is controlling the punishment and refusing to let Afton die. The voice lines about never letting the player live, combined with Golden Freddy's unique final cutscene where he twitches endlessly in darkness, suggest unresolved anger rather than peace. In this reading, the fire was enough to release the other spirits, but Golden Freddy chose to remain behind, driven by a desire for eternal retribution. Rest in this context would mean letting go, and this spirit is fundamentally incapable of doing so. This theory also emphasizes Golden Freddy's long-standing separation from physical rules. Throughout the series, he appears and disappears without explanation, crashes games, and behaves more like a manifestation than a machine. Because of this, supporters of this theory argue that the fire could not force him to move on. If Golden Freddy is bound by emotion rather than a suit, then his existence would persist as long as his rage does. Ultimate Custom Night, from this perspective, is not a natural afterlife, but a prison built entirely from that rage, with Golden Freddy at its center. Another theory suggests that Golden Freddy eventually did rest, but only after Ultimate Custom Night. In this interpretation, the endless torment is not truly infinite, but a final outburst of unresolved pain. The Old Man Consequences scene is central to this idea. He encourages the spirit to leave the demon to his demons and rest. While the game never shows the spirit accepting this advice directly, the presence of the option implies that rest is still possible. The argument here is that Ultimate Custom Night represents a transitional phase rather than a permanent state. Golden Freddy delays his own peace to ensure that Afton can never hurt anyone again, but this does not mean he is trapped forever. A more nuanced variation of this theory proposes that Golden Freddy's spirit did rest, but not in the way the others did. Instead of releasing his anger and moving on peacefully, he dissolves along with Afton. In this reading, the punishment itself consumes him. By anchoring his existence entirely to Afton's suffering, Golden Freddy ensures that when Afton is finally erased or neutralized, there is nothing left of himself either. This would explain why Golden Freddy does not appear as an independent force beyond Ultimate Custom Night. His rest is not calm or gentle, but self-destructive, defined by sacrifice rather than forgiveness. There is also a minority theory that Golden Freddy was never fully present in Ultimate Custom Night at all. According to this view, the game is Afton's own mind collapsing under guilt and memory, and Golden Freddy is simply the symbol his psyche assigns to the concept of consequence. In this interpretation, Golden Freddy's twitching image represents a memory that cannot be suppressed, not an active spirit choosing torment. If this is true, then the question of whether Golden Freddy rested becomes less literal. He rested when the fire happened, but his memory remains embedded in Afton's consciousness, endlessly resurfacing as punishment. Ultimately, the series never gives a definitive answer about Golden Freddy's fate, and that ambiguity is the point. Golden Freddy represents unresolved trauma more than any other character. Whether he rested or not depends on whether you believe unresolved trauma can ever truly be put to rest without acknowledgement and release. The evidence leans toward the idea that Golden Freddy did not immediately find peace, choosing instead to cling to vengeance. However, the presence of voices urging rest suggests that peace was always possible, even if it was delayed. Golden Freddy's story is not about a clean ending, but about the danger of letting pain become the only thing that keeps you alive.